every one of your lives very, very directly. Does anybody know what that event is? 100 years ago.
Dad's birth. Dad was born in 1892.
That's right. That was 101 years ago. That's right. That's the first one. There was something else that happened on a national scale that happened 100 years ago. Well, it was kind of regional scale. It happened to a lot of people, not just today. Anybody know? Yes, someone said it. The Cherokee Strip Land Rush. It happened 100 years ago. In fact, some of you might be able to see stamps. The post office has put out stamps commemorating the Cherokee Strip Land Rush. That's right. Grandpa was born, does anybody remember, in 93, September 16th. 15th. Okay. September 15th. Okay. Well, that's where I thought we'd start. Does anybody remember Grandpa telling the story about that? I've heard that some. Does anybody remember that story?
Yeah, speak at the mic.
Well, that's what we want to hear. Give John the microphone. What did he say? What did he say about that?
Well, he was telling about how they were in the strip and how the horses were lined up, and when they were off, it was chaos. You know, everybody took off, and everybody looked for a place to stake a claim.
I think they landed near Lahoma, where I understand, and they had no place to go, so they stayed in the dugouts for a week, or it was quite a length of time to stay in a dugout.
Like a hole in the
Like
ground.
a hole in the ground,
Or
because,
just dirt on top.
yeah.
But they had to watch their claim. See.
Do you guys remember anything about?
I just remember Dad talking about it, but I didn't know the particulars of that.
And I don't remember then what he said, that they staked the claim and then went back and got the family or something like that.
Yeah.
Because they come in, because he talks about walking back of the wagon, and the grass is so tall they couldn't look out, you know. So that's all he remembers of the trip.
Yeah. Because he would have been 1 year old, or I think
Because he
maybe
was
3
born
years old.
north of Mount Ridge. He showed me the place one time, but I don't remember just where it's at now. I wish I would have taken more notice.
I think it's over near the old Becker feed mill.
Yeah, that's where it was west of Becker's Feed Mill, if anybody knows where that's at.
I remember, I don't know if this was the time or not, but I remember talking about the carrot that had that milk cow that went behind the wagon, and the women were inside the wagon, but the guys had to walk beside it.
Didn't it take 2 weeks for them to travel from Mount Ridge to Lahoma? That's what I remember Dad talking about, that it took them 2 weeks. I was traveling at least that distance. And then they hunted rabbits. And I understand after that run of the Cherokee Strip, or the, what do you call it?
Cherokee Strip.
Cherokee Strip. And when they went back, I remember Dad saying one time that when it rained, he said we set buckets inside the house because it leaked through the sod. He said when plump in the buckets. That's the part I remember.
How many days later?
3 days after the rain, it would still be leaking, seeping through.
Any other stories that you remember about Grandpa or Grandma talking about those days?
I just remember that he left Mount Ridge and he said that when they got down to the Kansas-Oklahoma border there, that there were several places where the covered wagon had to go through the river, and there was no bridges, of course, and I just remember him saying that they had to go through the water.
Do any of you know anything about the time that he took a trip up to Indiana or up that way when he was a young man? He was telling us a story about that when we were driving one time, and we didn't record it, and I was just wondering if you knew anything like that.
You know, Jim Burkett has written some about this, and it's too bad that he isn't here because we researched that. I would guess that that would have been your grandpa when they first came over in 1874 or 1875 to Mount Ridge when they first settled. And that was your grandpa that went back, because a number of those men did that. They came basically with nothing.
Yeah, right.
And some of you know the story about Grandma. Her people came they landed in about December of the year, or January, and didn't have anything. And basically came to Kansas with no place to live, and they were put up in boxcars and grain sheds and that kind of stuff through that winter. And a number of people in that group actually died of exposure for whatever. Obviously, God spared Grandma, but that was the kind of conditions that they experienced when they first came over with Grandma's. That would be grandmother's, my grandma's mother and father that did that. So your do you guys remember anything about your grandparents? Because
I remember Granddad sitting out on the log when we went to the Blackjacks to cut wood, and we brought the wood home in the wagon. In 3 lengths, and then we'd have a bus saw and saw it up. And I remember him sitting on a stump there and watching that procedure. That's about all I can remember.
Grandpa lived with us at the time. He's dead. Right.
now that was Grandpa Smith. Okay.
Grandpa Smith lived with us at the time of his death.
Do you remember what year it was? What year did he die?
I looked that up in the genealogy. It was like 1934 or 1937. Does anybody remember?
Well, I think I was born in 34, and I can just barely remember an old man in the house. That's all I can remember.
Well, I think your grandma died. One of them died in 34, and one died in 37. And then of course Grandma Thomas. Do you remember telling? Yeah, maybe some folks. Go ahead and tell that story. I don't know what you know about it.
Well, actually, that was, I was only 1 year old, I think,
Yeah,
at the time that
the
the cyclone, and I can vividly remember a lot of things about that because we were rushed when it looked like it was going to be evident that we were going to have a storm.
This is before radar and
Right.
forecasters and all that. You look out the door and see what's coming.
And it was during the harvest time, and they were what they call the old wheat header barges that were horse-drawn. The header was even horse-drawn. And they brought them in and parked them in the yard, and we were rushed into the storm cellar maybe 30 minutes before the storm hits. But at the time the storm actually hit, those that were out watching came tumbling down the stairs. I mean, really rushing. Just tumbling down the stairs and then closed the stairway door. And then what I next remember is that when we came out of the stairway, up the stairway, out of the cave, after the storm was over, was seeing the house. There was no windows in the house. It had literally been just sucked out. And I remember a 2-car garage off remote, out across the driveway. And on that, the roof had been caved in, and there was a new car sitting in the garage. All right, and the windows were laying on, part of the windows that were sucked out of the house were laying on that roof, and there was a hat laying on that new car. And that car, the hat was crushed, but the car wasn't touched.
What was Dad tells about a lot of, it was during harvest time. And straw was driven into trees and everything you can imagine. And he said he remembered seeing these teams of horses running. And sometimes it'd be off the ground, sometimes it'd be down, literally picked them up. Literally picked them up, that's what he kept telling us about.
And then who wants to know about what happened there? Do you know, at least maybe, you probably don't remember it, but I think the story was that Grandma was going down the cellar.
She was between 2 of the boys, the Thomas boys, and they were taking her out. It was about from here to the back of the room to the cellar, and they took her out the back door and were literally just running at full speed with her. But they didn't make it quite to the doorway until she was sucked out from between them. And they tumbled down the stairway and then tied the rope down to keep the door shut. But after when they came out, Grandma was tangled up in some barbed wire at the
open well, cistern well. I don't remember this, but this is what I was told.
You know, along with that, I'd just like to say that Dad was a good weatherman. And I can see him just standing by the windows lots of times, just looking out and looking at the clouds. And I always felt like as long as he was around watching, we could all go to bed. But boy, I was nervous if Dad wasn't around because he was our weatherman.
I think he can beat some of the weathermen nowadays.
I had a question concerning the relationship we talked about Grandpa. I remember when I was growing up, just very, maybe 4 or 5 years of age, Uncle Andrew Eck. Dad talking about Uncle Andrew Eck. Who was he? Because where I remember him was from Johnny Schultz's house, which was north of our house, half a mile. There was what we call the overflow before we got to the school and the church there. And I remember Andrew Eck having a piece of cedar wood and with a penknife making these long corks with a hole in the middle that we fished with. And all I remember is the name Uncle Andrew Eck, making corks, and he made me one. And I don't know where he fits into the family, I'd like to know. He was always called Uncle Andrew Eck.
That was on the East Canaan side, I mean, on the Thomas side.
Well, we'll have to get out the family tree. I thought about drawing one out, but I didn't have time. We'll have to get out the family tree.
The only thing I remember about Grandpa Smith was that I must have been, see, I was born in 31, and if he died in 34, I was just a few years old. And in Mom and Dad's bedroom, there was two double beds. They slept in one side, and in the other side, there must have been 2 or 3 of us slept in that bed. and the day he died, there was a lot of crying going on and so forth, and he was laying in my spot. And that's all I remember.
That wasn't too I would just like to tell too about thinking about the storms. I remember how we used to take quilts and we'd go down to that cellar. You know, Dad would look at the clouds and he'd say, "There's a bad one coming." So we'd all get. And one time I know we got these little guys up here. It must have been Aaron and Laverne maybe, and carried them down. They were sleeping. Carried them down to the cellar, got the quilts, put them all down. They slept through the whole thing. In the morning we were talking about this storm. They said, "What storm?"
I remember in a house in Newton, one that was showing up here. We built that storm cellar shortly after 47 when we moved to Newton. And I remember one night the folks were gone, and I think Laverne and I don't know if Will was there or not, we did the same thing. We took blankets and a pillow, we went down there, locked that big door, and we stayed down there until morning. We slept down there all night.
What were the normal sleeping arrangements? We want to hear about what was that like sitting in the old place in Oklahoma, and then maybe what were the sleeping arrangements there?
Well, the boys all slept upstairs, you know, and
So you had that big room.
Yeah.
I slept in there.
It wasn't a well-insulated roof either.
There was
You
no-
could see the nails in the shingles. And there was icicles hanging all down.
There's no central air, right?
and if we broke a window, it was there for quite a while. Because I remember having snow on the pillow in the morning sometimes. And if the roof or the ceiling is still there, it's got broom marks on it from Dad pounding on the ceiling to get us out of bed. It would have a lot of broom marks on it.
He'd say, it was, especially during harvest time, he'd say, "Boys, the sun's up. The sun's up. You slept all night." And everything would be quiet, not a stir. "Boys!" You third time, we knew it was time to get up.
Feet were on the floor.
He talked about having a red poker. Yeah, he in the cold. He was coming up the stairs.
You must take that out of the covers if we didn't get out.
But I remember brushing snow off of the quilt in the morning.
This house that we had here, there was just 2 or 4 rafters, and then we slept. There was 2 double beds where the 4 younger of us slept. And there were mornings in the wintertime when there was snow on our pillow then. I want to tell one story. I remember one time we were not, in fact, I think we must have been, I don't know, Ben was the first, and maybe Will too, went to Newton to shop and like in the evenings to buy stuff. And I remember that Laverne and I and Will were laying in bed just with our shorts on. And Ben came home from Newton and he had bought some shaving cream.
That was when he was going to get married, wasn't it?
Well, maybe that was him.
Yeah.
And he came up the stairs, and we were laying in bed, and just our shorts on before we went to sleep at nighttime. He came home about 9 or 9:30 in the evening.
That's late.
And that was late. And he was shaking this shaving balm. He was shaking this thing as he came up around the corner of the stairs, and he says, and I remember the words he said, you boys want to see how this baby works? And he opened that there thing up like that, and we were just covered. It just exploded. We were white all over. He said, you boys want to see how this baby works? We saw it. We saw how it worked.
Now, wasn't there something about a fire? I heard a story last time here about a fire.
Yeah, by the way.
Yeah, I drove an old Model A.
Well, there was another fire went up in your room, on the east side where that chimney went up your room.
I don't remember that.
That was after
Yeah, I remember that
you boys
fire.
were at the camp, CBS camp.
Oh, you mean in Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
In Oklahoma, when on the east end of that house there was a chimney went up right on along the wall, and it protruded into the living room, into their bedroom upstairs. They were not at home at that time, but the chimney was so poor, that is, the mortar between the bricks was falling out, and of course we had a big old potbelly stove downstairs. And I don't know if we slept upstairs, but we were upstairs at that time, as I remember. There was a desk or something there. We were doing paperwork or schoolwork or something. And the fire came up that chimney. The chimney caught fire inside of the chimney. And the fire came through those porous bricks, and it caught the rafters on fire. And of course, we hollered at Dad, and Dad came up, and he said, boys, he said, the house is going. He said, get buckets and put the water on. And so that's what we did, and we saved the house. It got scarred up there, but we saved the house. But there was another time that there was a fire.
No, that was the old Model A.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the old, I had a Model A I drove to school, and
What year was that?
well, I don't remember that.
That was in Kansas already.
It was in Kansas, and we parked it. I had parked it in the on the south side of that the garage, the plow shed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, Dad called up and said, "Boys, the place is on fire."
Well, but we had been using it for baling, and we had the grease buckets in there. Don't you remember the old grease bucket?
I don't remember.
We had it in the back, and that all caught fire. And the only thing we could figure out is that the dome light shorted and got started on fire. I remember running out there, and it was right next to the shed, so we were trying to get the thing away from there. So we got the tractor out, and it had that mower on it with the blade up, you know. And then we backed it out, and the dumb thing dropped off, and we couldn't get it around. We finally got it out there and pulled that thing out into the yard there. By that time, the fire department was there.
But I remember the gas tank was right up on top. You know,
Yeah.
the little hole in the gas tank. It was just squirting out with
Which
gasoline.
is the blue flame went way out the spout, about 10 foot. And we had filled it the night before because we came home from baling prairie hay that day, as I remembered it. And we had filled it with 10 gallons of gasoline. And then when that thing caught fire, that little blue flame just went up there just straight, and the fire just rolled up that there tin shed until we got it pulled out away from there.
Ben, do you remember what you did with that old Model A afterward?
Yeah,
Tell them about that.
well, we stripped it all down, but we took the gas tank and mounted it up on top, and then we just went down through the ditches and stuff.
Yeah, they mounted just a board for a seat, because the seats were all burned out. And then they, he and old Bob Staley took it down the ditches, and they were driving down through the ditches like
The first dune buggy, right?
It'd be
And
worth
then what we did
10 grand.
after dark was two guys that get on each of the fenders, and with a rifle and a shotgun, we went out through the dark in the alfalfa field. When the jackrabbits came out, we shot jackrabbits through the fender, going about 30 mile an hour.
I remember that.
That's very advantage.
I want Leroy to tell about the time they go down the railroad with nobody in the car.
Leroy?
Leroy, tell about the time you guys got on the railroad and driving down the railroad with nobody in the car.
Well, that's a little later on.
I know, but it's...
I had an old 40 model Chevy, and by some way we found out it would fit right on the railroad tracks. And no, we didn't do nothing. We just drove on the railroad tracks. We drove on these spurs, you know, and we'd get right on the main track. And that old Chevy had a throttle on it. You know, you could pull it out, and you could go about as fast as you want. The rails were real rough. And the steering wheel would start going like that. You couldn't hang on to the steering wheel, you'd run off. But we'd pull the throttle out about as fast as it could go, you know. We'd get out on the fenders and wave at the neighbors. Yeah, in the dark, we'd put the dome light on and we'd all duck. And like when we go to Heston along the highway, and we'd have a whole row of cars seeing this car go down the railroad tracks, nobody in it. And one time, well, I could tell stories all night. It didn't get dark before I got through with this, but anyhow, one time we were going to Whitewater, and
You didn't just do this a few miles.
oh yeah. And we went to Whitewater, and the red light come on down there. Uh-oh, and we was at a big cut. And so, boy, we jumped back in a car, and we backed up again. And we thought the train was coming. And then the light went off. So the light went on here, you know. We did that, you know. So, back down there we went. And so, the guy said, well, you think we'll go by the station? And I said, well, yeah, we're out here. We just want to go by the station. And that old conductor guy... no, we never met a train like that. But we went to Cheverie one night, Heston, I believe it was, and some guys had been following us. And pretty soon we hit a big old bump, and he had stuck something on the rail to stop us. And we thought, well, maybe it was the police or sheriff or something, you know, or somebody. And it was some guy just wanted to know. He said, what in the world have you got on that car? Keep it on the track. And he wouldn't believe us that it would just run on the track. You know, he got underneath the car and he looked. We had some funny experiences.
Can you explain to some of the younger ones what a chivalry is?
The chivalry?
John, that's your turn.
I don't know how to explain chivalry. When a person got married, they got together and they would go to this guy's house. After it was,
It's so-called friends would get together.
yeah, friends would get together, and after dark, you know, and after maybe this couple had already gone to bed, and they would just get out there and they would raise Cain, you know, shoot firecrackers off, and have tin pans and everything else. Make a lot of racket. Just scare these people half to death.
And sometimes we'd get in the house, if they'd let us in, we'd take the labels off of all the cans and all that stuff, you know.
Well, when we got married, you had to have candy bars or something to hand out to everybody.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember dancing. It's sort of a trick or treat thing now. But I remember one time they took a buggy apart and put it up on the roof.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. I know Dad said one time they had taken a Chevrolet, they took an old buggy and they took it apart, took it up on there and put it back together, 2 wheels on each side on the roof of the barn. And then they took the saddle off the horse and tied it to the tail of the windmill.
What about the tar bus?
Hit a nerve there.
Can you repeat that?
Hey, Roger, what was the question?
What about the tar bucket? The tar bucket.
Dad always had, he always had a special. He had a name for everything, and he always expressed himself to us, you know, very freely. And I don't remember the people involved, but there was somebody came. One of the neighbors came over, and you know the story better than I do. But they had always took a nap right after lunchtime. And these neighbors came over and they had asked some question about baling hay, and Dad always had a special name for everybody. So these neighbors had come over and some of the other brothers were talking to him, and when Dad came out of the house, of this house that we showed here, he yelled to us boys, he said, "Say boys," he said, "who was that tar bucket out there?" The guy was standing right there. I said, "Who was that tar bucket out there?" And there he stood right there.
Tell the nicknames of everybody.
I remember one time too about the slop bucket. We had in that house there, they had kind of a lean-to on the back where Mom did all her cooking and stuff when it was hot, you know. So she didn't have to heat up the house so much. We could open up all the windows. And that's where she kept the slop bucket. And you know what that is a clean. Everything off the table went into that bucket and it fed it to the hogs. We had no disposals or anything like that, so the neighbor boy came over, and these guys, we were up there in the attic working on something, and neighbor boy come over and he wanted to see what we were doing. When he got through, he kind of stepped backwards downstairs, and somebody had set that bucket right at the head of the stairs, and he stepped right into it. And them shoes, he took them off. They were laying there years later, moving back to that place.
Now you said that Grandpa had a name for everybody. Now, what was his name for you? We want to know everybody's nickname.
I can remember some of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. We better have someone else tell on somebody else, because you probably don't tell on yourself.
Let's see. How was that? You were the boy. I was the boy. You was Beeps.
Wait a minute, give me the microphone.
Beeps, Ben, and the boy.
Right, Beeps, Ben.
He was Ben. He was the boy. He was Beeps. And I was Honey Deer. The whole story behind this one was because when I was 5, I had that big mastoid. And then when we was in Enid in that hospital, Melinda, you remember how many weeks? Was it 7 or 11 weeks I was in the hospital? And the nurse was named Libby, and she always called me Honey Deer. That's what it came from. Melinda was called Sis, always.
You're Cobb.
Yeah, you were always see, when I knew, you were
That came from some of the brothers, though, more than Dad. I think Melvin picked that one up because we were out in the barn, that same barn that you saw, and building stock racks for the truck. And it was a cold winter day. We had the doors closed and such, and we heated that with an old potbelly stove. And of course we used everything we possibly could, and the cobs were always shelled. I mean, the corn was shelled and the cobs were kept for fuel. And I think Melvin said, "Go out and get some more cobs, Cobb." And that's where it started, and from there on it was. While we were building these stock racks, we lacked I think as I remember, it was a 3/8 or 1/4 inch bit. But the neighbors had one, so we went to his brother Dave's house to get the bit, and we drove, I don't know what we drove, the old truck or something. And I know Melvin, I think, was driving, and we were sitting on the side of the seat, and Melvin had said, "Come on, let's really shove in the cobs now." And so when he stepped on the gas, we were shoving in the cobs. That's where the name came from.
Well, what was Melvin's name? What did he call Melvin? Does anybody remember?
The older brothers didn't have it.
Oh, the older brothers didn't have that.
I don't know where that
I
started.
don't know where that started.
I don't either. I have no idea where that.
Lois was Bugs.
yeah, Lois was Bugs. I remember that too. Lois was Bugs, and I remember, I didn't know what your name was for a long time. You were Uncle Pop. Yeah. And Pop, no one knows where Bud came from? Uncle Bud?
I think Dad called him for a gift from Dad, I think.
I guess.
But so Frank and Melvin, you guys never got it.
Melvin or John didn't have nicknames.
Respect.
Melinda?
The older ones had respect, they didn't.
I guess.
Melinda, whatever happened to the old pump organ that you used to play when I first started to date Melvin?
I wish I knew.
We'd sing in the afternoon.
I don't know where it stayed. I think it got sold in that sale possibly that we had when we moved from Oklahoma. The old pump organ. I think we probably sold that in that sale, don't you, where we moved to Kansas?
Yeah. Tell about getting together on Sunday afternoons. When did you get together to turn ice cream and sing? Was that when you played pump organ, or
They called over, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a little later on, but we'd get together quite regularly, probably every Sunday afternoon at least, or sometimes during the week.
John Schultz was one of the main guys to go with.
And we would get together and play instruments and make ice cream and have hamburgers and that type of thing. Once in a while I hamburgers, but mostly bologna, I guess that's right. That was a great time to spend evenings like that.
And who played the instruments?
Well, you played mandolin one time.
Yeah, I played the mandolin, you played the guitar.
Yeah.
You played the violin. Dad played the violin.
And Dad played violin. Grandma pumped the organ. She played the organ.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, she played a little.
And
You have Dad's old fiddle.
Yeah, I've got that.
I wish you all played under the double eagle just for me.
Yeah.
Bud, tell them about the time that the people on the party lines, our cousins always wanted to listen in when we made ice cream, and you called John Schultz.
Oh, yeah.
He called over and said, if I call you, I'll tell you, we'll get together. And if I don't call, we don't worry about it. See? So he called up and he said, how are you? Oh, fine. I said, well, let me all in. He's called.
And the funny thing was, she went to that place where we said we was going to be, and we weren't there.
She always wanted to get in on the ice cream too, and we wanted to not let her get in.
So she heard it over the telephone and she thought she knew where to go.
Yeah.
There was a party line. Everybody's a party line.
Roger, we'd like to know year they were born and their date, please. Starting with The oldest. Include Frank and Melvin, please.
Okay, Pauline, what was Frank's birthday? What year?
December. Last day of December.
It's about 17th or 18th.
December 17th?
No, I mean 1917 or 18. Yeah. It was 1918, I think.
Yeah, it must have been 18 because Melvin was 2 years younger. He was born in 1920.
Okay, yeah.
Younger.
December 30, 1918. Okay, and what was Melvin's birthday?
Melvin was born September 12th, 1920. That's what his birth certificate said, but Mom always said it was September 11th.
Okay, so
But his birth certificate says September 12th.
September
11th. But his birth certificate says September 12th, 1920.
1920.
John, I was born in September 11th, 1922.
Okay, so you're just a day apart or on the same day?
Well, that's why we always separated, we always celebrated on the same birthday. But his birth certificate, but we didn't have to have birth certificates in those days like you do now. I didn't have a birth certificate till I came to Colorado and had applied for a plumber's license.
Is that right?
That's when I had to get a birth certificate.
Good.
Well, I was born in September 20, 1924. So I was just pretty close to these guys being, three of us were just almost 2 years apart.
And you were all born at home?
Oh yes, we was all born at home.
And was everybody born at home?
I don't know if I was. I think everybody, I'm not sure about Lois. I think we were all born at home.
Lois was born at home.
She was, we were all born at home.
Okay, keep going then. What's your birthday?
May the 6th, 1927.
There was one between you and...
Yes, there was
Tell about that.
a little boy between me and Ben, Ellen Dewey, and he was, I have it at home, but I don't know.
He was about
18 months.
He was,
18 months when he died.
was he? But I don't know his birthday.
The way I understand it, I was named Benny Jr.
You were Benny Jr.
I was Benny Jr., but then when I went to college, I needed a birth certificate, and it came back Ben W. So I'm Ben
Well, she changed it.
Westwood.
Yeah, at a younger age, she put down something else. I think your mother changed it when you were younger than that.
That could have been.
Ben.
Anyway, December 4, 31.
And I was born January 4 of 34. My birth certificate said Eugene Willis. And all those years I've been writing my name Willie Eugene. And so then I had my birth certificate amended.
I was born 23rd day of March, 1936. December 2nd, 1939.
And then, does anybody know Lois?
Lois.
6/28/43.
6/28/43. Well, any other questions? You got them here.
How many were born in Oklahoma and how many in Kansas?
We were all in Oklahoma. All in Oklahoma. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, that's all.
She was 47. Yeah, she was just 2 years.
How was it that Grandpa and Grandma decided to move back to Kansas? I mean, Grandpa was born and Grandma was born in Oklahoma. But how was it that they decided to move back to
I
Kansas?
think those. I know my version of it. I'm not sure if it matches the older one. Well, as it was impressed upon me was, Dad had an 80 acres at Uncle Mike's place there, and he had 2 80s on the old home place, right? And way I remember Dad saying, I couldn't make it.
Yeah, he had 180 in the blackjack.
Yeah, another 80 in blackjacks, and he said he just couldn't make enough profit to feed and clothe and provide for the family. So I think, as I remember, it was John, I don't know, and I think Frank went with you, and they went to Newton, to Mount Ridge, to Eads, Colorado, different places. They scouted out different farm sites, and then they found that they liked the Newton site probably best because it was most you went with him to Eads, because I remember Eads, Newton, Mound Ridge, and just to scout out different possibilities. And I remember that the place that Dad bought in Newton, the 2 quarters, which were the half section there, I think he paid $40,000 for two quarters.
2 miles out of town.
Yeah.
Just a mile across from our house, exactly, now.
Yeah.
Mile across the section.
Tell about scouting lines, when you had to do that.
Well, I think he could see, you know, by looking at it and by talking to some of our relation, like Uncle Lewis lived at Galva or Mound Ridge, and tell about how much more productive that ground was there than what we're used to down there. It was all washed away. So he did, that's what swayed him toward selling out and moving. And we moved everything, even including the old thrashing machine. Put it on the rubber tires and pulling it behind the truck.
And wasn't it the first crop that you put in that, it was spring of 47 or the fall of 47? We plowed 1 week straight. We dropped the plow on the ground Monday morning at 3 a.m. and didn't finish till what time Saturday night?
Saturday noon.
We didn't shut off the tractor except the fuel.
For 1 week, day and night, it ran continuously. We slept in the back of the old farm truck, and 4 of us boys, the gas tank held 25 gallons, and when we needed an oil change, we opened the plug, we drained the oil while the gas was being put in the tank. We closed it up, we filled it with oil, and we kept going.
It stopped.
It never, the tractor never cooled off from Monday morning at 3 a.m. till Saturday noon, 12 o'clock.
Pork and beans was the menu.
And that was finishing up in Oklahoma, or that was plowing the new ground?
To Kansas.
That was after we moved to Kansas.
Okay, that was moving in.
We moved to Kansas on March 18th, or was it? March 18th, 1947.
And I know you guys probably wouldn't remember that, but when we were working at Blackjack Farm, we always send Dad to the farm to town for lunch, and we told him to bring back not bologna, but dog.
And he brought back Rex.
And he brought back Rex, which was a special kind of dog.
Sometimes it was Rover who couldn't get Rex.
Yeah. Well, it was just different.
Well, instead of just plain bologna, we wanted chopped ham or something like that, see? We called it pressed ham. And so we wanted not just plain old dog, but we wanted Rex.
One step up, a little better grade.
Well, we've been going about 40 minutes. I don't know what the...
That's probably enough.
What the... This is your last chance. Oh, I want to ask about church. Now tell about getting ready to go to church. What happened in church? And how you behaved in church. Let's hear about that.
We were little angels.
We just sat like this.
Who all's in church? I mean, mostly the Thomases, right? And your family, and some of the Smiths. And it's mostly your family.
I think all the Smiths went to church regularly.
Oh yeah, we never missed.
Never miss.
We were in church every Sunday.
I can remember times when we went to church when the roads were all mud and the roots were deep, but we never stayed home.
I can remember when John and Frank, or was it Leroy, I don't remember, sitting on the old Chevy, that black Chevy, the 2 fenders, and Dad driving, and some of them hanging on the axe on the bumper in the back. The inside, Mom was there with all the family, and some of the 3 boys, older boys, sometimes walked across the field, through the pond, through the creek, to go to church because we couldn't all get in the same car.
Yeah, didn't have vans.
Well, we also, when I first remember church, we was totally segregated. You know, the women on one side and the men on the other side, and it was the sermon was always in German. It was total German. We didn't have
an English sermon every so often.
Well, that was a little later on. It was a little later on we did. But the problem was, you know, when you were small, you sat with Mom, you know. And the point that you reached when you got graduated to the men's side, and then you had to sit in front of the men and behave, because your head had to be pretty straight, or you heard about it.
What about German at home? Did you talk a lot of German at home then?
Bondage. We talked. I remember speaking at home German until I was about 15 or something like that. Anyway, when we came back from Africa, Mom would talk to me in German, and I couldn't. And I'd talk back in Amharic. I really couldn't. I couldn't remember German.
Tell about how Mom got the clothes ready for church on Saturday night.
Well, I remember that.
Well, let me tell you, I remember bath time. We took a bath once a week if we needed it or not.
That's right.
And Saturday night was bath time. We, of course, had a certain order too, and the water wasn't changed too often either. But we all went through it, and we came out just like a roach. Yeah, big old wash tub. We didn't have a bathtub.
It was back in the pantry, wasn't it?
Yeah, back in the pantry.
And you
We heated a little water on the stove and threw it in there, and
Oh, I remember setting it out in the sun to get warm first.
In the summertime, we had an old wash house outside, and Mom would put water in that kettle and build a fire and heat the water, and then we would put a bucket of water in the big wash tub, the big galvanized tub, with some cold water, and that's where we took turns one after another.
And if he's lucky, he got the clean water.
Anything else?
We probably rambled enough.
I guess that's good. I think God is